Some children only love the version of you they can brag about. The day I learned that, for real, was the day my own blood looked me in the face and told me I reeked of poverty. My name is Della Lewis, and if you're hearing this, just know this isn't a story I tell because I'm proud. I tell it because it's the truth that split my life into a before and an after. I was turning 40 that night, not the kind of 40 people celebrate with balloons and a photographer. My 40 was the kind you survive. I'd come home from my cafeteria shift with my back screaming and my palms smelling like burnt steam trays. I passed the little corner store with the cheap birthday cakes in the window, yellow frosting, pink roses, happy birthday, written like a child did it. For half a second, I thought about buying one. But when rent is late and light bills talk louder than joy, sweetness becomes a luxury you don't touch. So I walked home empty-handed. Inside, Tyrone and Kiana were sitting at the kitchen table like judges waiting on a sentence. Teenagers develop a silence that feels like a blade. They don't swing it, they just place it on the table and let you see how sharp it is. Kiana glanced at my hands. So nothing. Her tone wasn't disappointment. It was disgust pretending to be casual. I didn't want to waste money. I said softly, "We're okay. I'm okay." But even as I said it, something in the air leaned away from me. Tyrone leaned back in his chair, arms folded like he'd been saving this moment. "You know what? We're never getting out of this. You don't even try, Ma." The words didn't land. They slammed. I straightened a little. "Tyrone." "No," he snapped. "You reek of poverty. Everything about you keeps us stuck." My heart didn't break. It stopped in that slow, stunned way pain freezes a person before it cuts. Kiana pushed her chair back next. "Kids at school clown us because of you. We're tired, Ma. We're embarrassed. You don't even buy a birthday cake. Who does that?" I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. They grabbed their bags, their shoes, their pride, and they walked out my door like it was the final answer to a question they'd been rehearsing. I didn't chase them. My legs wouldn't move. I sat there in the thick quiet of a kitchen that suddenly didn't belong to me anymore. Time passed, slow, then fast, then not at all. The light outside changed colors. The shadows stretched across my floor like they were trying to reach for someone I couldn't be anymore. About halfway through that stillness, I noticed 3 figures across the street, standing under the street lamp, watching my house the way stray hearts watch open doors. Street kids. Kids I'd slipped leftovers to for months when I had extra, which wasn't often. Isaac, Mila, Jordan. They didn't call out, didn't wave, didn't look curious. They just watched me like hunger recognizes hurt. Their presence tightened something inside me. Not pain, not fear. Loneliness. The kind that presses your hand to a doorknob before your mind catches up. If you're hearing me right now, comment the time you're watching from your end, because this part of the story feels different depending on the hour. Some truths hit harder at night. I opened the door. The porch creaked, the air cooled my face, and 3 pairs of eyes looked straight into the space my children had left empty. I didn't think, didn't plan, didn't weigh consequences. My voice came out small, tired, but open. "If anybody wants to come in, do." They didn't rush in when I opened that door. They stepped in slow, like animals unsure if the space was safe enough to breathe in. I didn't guide them. I didn't tell them where to sit or what to touch. My body moved ahead of my mind, walking back into the house like I'd done something normal, not something a woman should question later. Isaac was the first one through the door, tall for his age, but carrying himself like he'd been shrinking for years. Mila slipped in behind him, her shoulders tight, her eyes flicking around the room as if checking for danger before letting her breath out. And little Jordan, he didn't even look up. He walked in clutching the sleeves of his oversized hoodie like he was holding himself together with fabric. I didn't ask their ages. I didn't ask where they'd slept the night before. I didn't ask why they always hovered around the corner store or the bus stop. I didn't have the voice for those questions. My throat still felt raw from Tyrone's words, from Kiana's footsteps leaving my house the way smoke leaves a burning room. I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge like someone on autopilot. Leftover rice, a small piece of chicken, 2 slices of bread. They came in quietly after me. No shuffling, no talking, just the sound of 3 empty stomachs waiting for permission. Sit, I muttered. They obeyed, not out of obedience, but out of the simple instinct children have. Food means stay still. I warmed everything I had, split it 3 ways, and set the plates down. They ate with the kind of hunger that doesn't ask for seasoning or heat. It only asks for survival. No thank yous. No smiles. Just forks scraping plates like teeth biting into silence. I leaned against the counter and watched them. The house felt different with bodies in it. Heavier, smaller, but not unbearable. Not the way it had felt 10 minutes before when my own children's anger still hung in the air like smoke. Isaac finished first. He didn't look up. He just set his fork down with careful respect, like noise might break something in the room. Mila ate slowly, glancing at me every few seconds as if expecting me to change my mind and kick them out. Jordan licked his plate clean, then wiped his mouth on his sleeve, quick and practiced. I realized something then. Loneliness moves you before logic can catch up. It stretches itself out inside a quiet house until any sound, anybody, feels like oxygen. I wasn't trying to save them. I wasn't being noble. I just couldn't sit in that house alone. When they finished eating, they didn't move. They didn't thank me. They didn't ask why I let them in. They just stared at their empty plates, shoulders still tense, waiting for whatever came next. Y'all good? I asked. My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. Isaac nodded once. Mila whispered, "Yes, ma'am." Jordan just blinked at me, like he was afraid blinking too slow might get him put back outside. I walked to the sink and turned on the water just to have a sound in the room that wasn't breathing. As I washed the dishes, I felt their eyes shift, not toward me, but toward the front door, still unlocked. When I turned around, Isaac was standing, hands at his sides like a soldier unsure of his orders. He cleared his throat, barely audible. We can go sleep outside," he said, "if you want the house quiet." I looked at him, really looked, at the thin wrists, the hollow cheeks, the dull way he was bracing himself for rejection, like rejection was the most familiar bed he knew. A pressure moved in my chest, slow and burning. Not motherly, not heroic, just human. "No," I said, "stay for tonight." They exchanged a brief glance, quick, cautious relief. They gathered their thin jackets and moved toward the living room floor, arranging themselves close but not touching. Street kids always sleep like they're guarding air. When they settled, Isaac looked up at me, eyes steady but unsure. "Should we leave in the morning? I didn't plan a speech. I didn't plan anything, really. Morning crept up on me before my thoughts did. And when I found the three of them curled together on my living room floor, Isaac on his back, Mila folded into herself, Jordan hugging a pillow like it was a person, I felt something shift inside me. Not warmth, not attachment, just a quiet realization that the house didn't echo the way it used to. They woke up slowly, blinking against the thin morning light slipping through my cheap curtains. No one said good morning. Street children don't greet the day. They survive it. I stood there in my work clothes, holding my purse strap with fingers that still felt unsteady from the night before. Stay if you want, I heard myself say. It came out flat. Not proud, not inviting, just honest. The kind of honesty tired people speak without thinking. Isaac pushed himself up first, his expression unreadable. Mila rubbed her eyes, careful not to look too hopeful. Jordan stretched, small and silent, like he was afraid the wrong sound would get him sent outside. Thank you, Mila whispered, but the words barely touched the air. Isaac only nodded. Jordan didn't speak at all. I grabbed my keys and walked toward the door. Usually, I'd lock up behind myself, double-check the windows, make sure every point of entry was sealed. But today, I didn't. I left the door unlocked behind me, not because I trusted them, not because I didn't care, but because locking it suddenly felt unnecessary. A house full of silence doesn't need protection. It needs presence. The bus ride to work felt longer than usual. The morning cold bit through my thin jacket, and my legs ached from standing the day before. As the bus rattled down the street, I expected guilt to rise up in me, fear that I'd left strangers in my home. But it didn't. What rose instead was an emptiness that felt less heavy than yesterday's version, a different kind of hollow. At the cafeteria, the steam from the breakfast trays fogged my face shield. I moved through the motion of scooping eggs, wiping trays, cleaning tables. People talked, but their voices blurred into the low hum of survival noise. I kept seeing the three of them sleeping on that floor, still as shadows, but real enough to pull me out of my own mind. During my break, I found myself staring at my hands. Rough, faint scars across the knuckles from scrubbing too hard. Those hands had fed the children I birthed. And last night, they had fed strangers who didn't look at me with judgment. Loneliness does that. It tricks you into opening the door before you even know why. When my shift ended, I walked back home on stiff legs. The air had warmed a little, but the chill inside me hadn't moved. As I turned onto my block, fear flickered through me for the first time. What if they stole something? What if they left the door wide open? What if taking them in was the first step toward losing the only thing I still owned? My hand shook when I reached for the doorknob. The door was closed. Inside, the living room had changed. The blankets were folded. The floor was swept. My old radio was fixed and placed neatly on the table. And the house, it didn't feel violated. It felt used, lived in, as if their presence had quietly rearranged the air. Isaac stood in the corner, adjusting the knobs of the radio like it was a delicate instrument. Mila was wiping the table with a cloth she must have found under the sink. Jordan was organizing my grocery bags from days ago, folding them as if they were valuable. No one apologized for being there. No one thanked me again. They just worked around me, not as family, not as guests, just as people who understood how to fill a space without making noise. I opened my purse to put down my paycheck stub when I saw it, a thin envelope wedged through the mail slot. I pulled it out, my stomach coiling tight, as if it already knew the weight inside. Red letters stared up at me. Eviction notice. I didn't sleep that night. The eviction notice sat on the table like a living thing, its red letters breathing in the dark. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyrone's face, Kiana's silence, and then the 3 children lying across my floor, too still, too familiar in a way that scared me. By sunrise, I'd made a decision without ever speaking it aloud. I walked into the cafeteria early and asked for another shift. The manager looked at me with that tired expression supervisors get when they want to say no, but can't afford to lose a body. You sure, Della? You done worked 2 doubles this week. I'm sure, I said. My voice didn't shake. Fear makes you sound braver than you are. He nodded. Then clock in. The day stretched long, the kind of long that bends your back and makes your bones feel older than your birthday ever could. I boxed lunches, wiped down tables, stacked trays, and forced my body forward even when my knees talked back. All I could think about was the rent, the notice, the thought of stepping into another empty space after losing my children so quickly. When I came home that evening, the door opened before I touched it. Isaac stood there, grease on his hands, expression steady. He didn't ask where I'd been. He didn't ask why my shoulders were slumped. He just stepped aside so I could walk in. The house wasn't quiet this time. Jordan was sorting aluminum cans in a small pile near the back door. His little hands worked fast, practiced. Mila was sweeping with a broken broom she'd tied together with twine. The floor looked cleaner than I'd seen it in months. What y'all doing? I asked. None of them paused. Jordan lifted his head. Collecting metal. For what? I asked. He shrugged, eyes sharp for someone so small. We sell it. Mila added, we always done it. People throw away money without knowing. Isaac was bent over my broken heater, screwdriver in hand. He didn't look up when he spoke. We won't break anything. We won't cost you nothing. There was no gratitude in their voices, no affection, just logic, the logic of children who had survived by fixing, gathering, adapting. I stood there watching them work inside my house like they'd been born into it. Not family, not strangers, just people filling space because silence is dangerous to those who've lived on the street. I placed my purse on the counter and sat down slowly. My body felt heavier than it should have. Every muscle trembled under the weight of hours I'd worked past exhaustion. I watched Isaac repair things I didn't even know were broken, watched Mila scrub corners, as if dirt was a reminder of every place she'd slept before. Watched Jordan line up cans with the seriousness of a child who'd never had a toy to line up instead. They didn't do these things for me. They did it because street kids learn early. If you make yourself useful, people don't push you out. And I didn't stop them. I couldn't. The weight inside me was growing. Fear of losing the only space holding me together. Fear of the world swallowing these children again if my roof caved in. Fear of running out of time before the eviction turned from paper to action. That night, I set my clothes out for the next day. Another shift, another round of bending my spine to keep a house I barely owned. The next morning, my legs felt weak before I even reached the bus stop. The cold bit into my joints. I told myself it was just fatigue. Nothing new. I clocked in, tied my apron, and pushed through breakfast service. The cafeteria buzzed with noise, kids laughing, trays clattering, steam rising from boiling pans. But somewhere between wiping a table and lifting a crate of milk cartons, something inside me snapped loose. The room tilted. My vision blurred. The crate slipped from my hands. And before I could steady myself, the floor rushed up to meet me, cold and hard. I didn't even feel myself fall. I just heard someone shouting my name as everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I felt was confusion. My cheek was pressed against something soft, not a cafeteria floor. The air smelled like home. Old fabric, faint bleach, the familiar warmth of a space that had known me longer than anyone else alive. I was in my own bed. I didn't remember getting here. My body ached in places it hadn't just yesterday, and my head felt heavy, like sleep had dragged me somewhere far before dropping me back without warning. As my vision cleared, I saw a shadow by the doorway, not moving, just watching. Isaac. He stood still, arms folded, jaw tight, eyes fixed on my face like he was checking if my chest was rising. There was no relief in his expression, not the kind you say out loud. But something in the way he blinked, slow and careful, told me he'd been scared. "Y'all brought me home?" I whispered. My voice sounded rough, like it belonged to a different woman. He nodded once. "You passed out." I pushed myself up slowly. My arms trembled under me, embarrassing in a quiet way I couldn't hide. He stepped forward, not touching me, but angled like he would catch me if I leaned the wrong way. How'd you get me here?" I asked. His eyes flicked toward the living room. "We carried you." No arrogance. No dramatics. Just a fact. I pictured it. Isaac lifting most of my weight, Mila pushing from behind, Jordan trying to keep my arm from dragging. A group of kids who'd only known me 2 nights, hauling a grown woman across sidewalks because survival had taught them how to move bodies without asking questions. Before I could speak, I heard movement outside the door. Mila's small face peeked in, eyes wide like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to enter. Jordan stood behind her, clutching a blanket he must have placed over me earlier. Mila held a cup of water with both hands. "You thirsty?" she asked, barely audible. I reached for it. She flinched, not away, but forward, as if she was afraid I'd drop it. Jordan placed the blanket closer to me and stepped back quickly, the way children do when they're trying to help without drawing attention. None of them said they were worried. None of them said they thought I might die on that cafeteria floor. Street kids don't speak fear. They show it. Mila hovering in the doorway, Jordan pacing in small circles, Isaac not blinking unless I breathed. I drank the water slowly. The room felt warmer with all 3 of them standing there like they didn't know how to leave. "You can sit," I said. They didn't sit. They just stayed close, like distance was dangerous. When I finally stood up, Isaac shifted his weight, like he was ready to grab my elbow if I wobbled. I pretended not to see it. Pride is fragile when you're weak. We walked into the living room together. The place looked cleaner than it ever had. My folded laundry sat on the chair. My shoes were neatly lined by the door. The scraps of metal Jordan had collected were sorted in tight piles. The heater Isaac had worked on hummed softly. They hadn't done this for affection. They'd done it because losing the roof meant losing their only chance at stability. Loneliness had brought them in. Fear kept them close. But something else, something small and unnamed, was forming in that space between us. I felt it when Jordan kept glancing up at me. I felt it when Mila chose to stand near my hip instead of the wall. I felt it when Isaac took one slow breath after another, never looking away too long. They needed this house, but they needed me more, not as a mother, not as a savior, as a center, something to orbit so they wouldn't drift back into the dark. A quiet pact settled into the room. No words, just a shared understanding. None of us were leaving. I sat down slowly, letting the weight of the day settle in my bones. The fear from yesterday hadn't left, but something steadier sat beside it. Then, without warning, Isaac turned toward the door. "I'll be back," he said. A few minutes later, the porch creaked. Heavy footsteps. A dragging sound. Then the door pushed open, and he stepped inside, breathing hard. In his hands, and scraping across the floor behind him, was a broken computer he'd pulled from a trash pile. I didn't understand what Isaac saw in that broken computer. To me, it was just a dead machine somebody threw away. But he dragged it across my floor like it was a living thing needing help. He set it on the table, wiped his hands on his jeans, and started taking it apart with an old screwdriver he must have found in my drawer. He didn't ask permission. He didn't explain. He just worked. His eyes narrowed in that focused way I'd noticed before. Quiet, steady, too grown for a boy his age. The world hadn't taught him softness, but it had taught him attention, taught him to listen to the smallest details, because missing one could cost survival. Mila sat on the carpet, sorting the screws he dropped. Jordan watched from the floor, chin on his knees, fascinated but silent. I stood near the stove, pretending to watch my pot boil, but really watching Isaac's hands move, careful, precise, patient. Nobody had ever nurtured that in him. You could tell, not from what he said, but from the way he flinched when a piece snapped louder than expected, like he expected someone to yell. But I didn't yell. I didn't tell him to stop or question what he was doing. I didn't give a speech about potential or hard work or dreams. I wasn't that kind of woman, and he wasn't that kind of boy. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a child is step back and let whatever's inside them breathe. The computer didn't come back to life that night, but the boy working on it did. The next day, he showed up with 2 radios under his arm, both from the trash, both dead as the computer. He asked if he could use the table. I nodded. That became our routine. I left for work, came home exhausted, and there he'd be, tools scattered, wires exposed, Mila sweeping around him, Jordan picking up dropped screws. Within a week, neighbors started noticing. First, it was Mr. Harris, the man from down the hall whose radio had been stuck on static for months. He knocked, sheepish, holding it out like he wasn't sure if he should ask. Isaac took it, turned it over in his hands, and got to work. No promises, no hesitation, just focus. He fixed it in 20 minutes. Word spread faster than I expected. A busted blender, a fan that wouldn't spin, a phone with a cracked speaker. Our home became a quiet workshop. People didn't pay him at first. They just thanked him. Surprised a child could do what grown men charged too much for. But Isaac didn't seem to care about payment. He cared about the work. I watched him from the doorway, tired from double shifts, and something inside me softened. Not in a sentimental way. Not like a mother claiming a child. More like a woman recognizing strength in a space she hadn't expected to find it. One evening, I came home to see Isaac hunched over a small TV someone had dropped off. His fingers moved with that same steady rhythm, and I could tell he was close to solving something important in the machine's guts. "You hungry?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Almost done." Those two words hit me deeper than I expected. Almost done. Like fixing things wasn't just what he did. It was who he was before life got loud and hard. I set dinner on the table and sat down, letting him work. The house hummed with quiet purpose. Mila's pencil scratched softly against homework paper. Jordan whispered to himself as he stacked cans. And Isaac breathed slow, steady, focused. Then the knock came. A firm, confident knock. Not a neighbor. Not someone looking for a repair. I opened the door and found a tall man with a brown work apron, grease stains on his fingers, and a name tag that read Mr. Willis, Tech and Repair. He nodded politely. "Ma'am, I heard there's a kid in here fixing things better than half my staff." My stomach tightened. Before I could answer, he saw Isaac at the table, face deep in wires, brow furrowed like the world narrowed to whatever machine he was healing. Mr. Willis stepped inside, slowly, watching him. "That boy," he said quietly, "has hands built for this." Isaac finally looked up. Mr. Willis extended a card. "I'd like to mentor you," he said. Mr. Willis didn't disappear after offering that card. The next morning, as sunlight crawled across my living room floor, he knocked again, firmer this time, but not aggressive. The kind of knock that said he wasn't here by accident. I opened the door slowly, wiping my hands on my skirt without realizing they were shaking. He stood there in his grease-stained apron, holding a paper bag with the quiet confidence of a man who fixes things for a living and understands that some repairs go deeper than wires. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his head with respect. "I wanted to stop by properly. Talk, if you don't mind." My throat tightened. I wasn't used to grown men coming to my door unless it was a bill collector or some neighbor complaining about noise. I stepped aside and let him in, feeling the same unease I feel every time someone successful walks too close to my truth. Isaac was at the table again, sorting parts from a broken lamp. He looked up when Mr. Willis entered. Not scared, not shy, just alert, the way boys become when life has taught them to study people before trusting their intentions. Mr. Willis nodded at him. "Morning, young man." Isaac nodded back, expression steady. I motioned toward the kitchen. "You want something to drink?" "No, ma'am," he said. "I just wanted to see where he comes from." The words hit a place inside me I didn't know was swollen. Where he comes from. If he only knew how thin that answer was. I folded my arms without meaning to. "I ain't got much of a story," I said. He looked around, not judging, not pitying, just observing the details. The folded blankets, the fixed heater, the sorted cans, the repaired radio humming softly in the corner. Evidence of survival, not shame. "Looks like honesty to me," he said, voice low. I didn't respond. My pride and my vulnerability collided so hard inside me, I didn't know which to protect. Mr. Willis crouched beside Isaac, watching his hands work. "You got patience," he said. "That's rare. People want fast results. You take your time." Isaac shrugged. "Things break easy. They don't fix easy." That line landed somewhere deep in my chest. Mr. Willis rubbed his chin, impressed. "You think you'd like learning more? Tools, parts, real equipment." Isaac's eyes lifted, not glowing, not wide, just steady with a hunger too quiet for most folks to notice. "Yes," he said simply. No begging, no excitement, just a boy recognizing an open door and stepping through without fear. Mr. Willis turned to me. If you allow it, I'd like him at my shop after school hours. Paid eventually once he learns enough. My heart thumped. Isaac glanced at me, not asking but waiting. I felt exposed again, like this man was shining a light on parts of my life I'd been hiding beneath work schedules and exhaustion. You don't owe us nothing, I said carefully. He shook his head. This ain't charity, Ms. Lewis. I'm investing in something I recognize. Talent don't grow without hands teaching it. I swallowed hard. Compliments aren't free where I come from. They usually lead to favors or hidden strings. But something about the way he stood, firm, grounded, not pushing, made me believe him. All right, I said. Isaac didn't smile. He just picked up another screw and kept working, but his shoulders eased. Mila exhaled softly beside him. Jordan leaned closer. They all understood what this meant without a single word spoken. Mr. Willis stayed for a few minutes, explaining what the shop was like, how Isaac would be safe, how he'd make sure no one took advantage of him. He spoke like a man who'd grown up in the same kind of neighborhoods, who knew the difference between opportunity and exploitation. When he finally left, the house fell into a thick, thoughtful quiet. Isaac unscrewed the last piece of the lamp and looked up at me, really looked, not as a stranger, not as someone waiting for the next roof to fall. Something else lived in his eyes now, something with shape. He wiped his hands on his jeans. Miss Della, he said slowly, steady as truth, I want to build a business one day. It started with the lamp, then the radio, then a busted microwave from a neighbor down the hall. By the end of the second week, my living room didn't feel like a living room anymore. It felt like the beginning of something that didn't have a name yet, just wires, screwdrivers, cracked screens, and Isaac sitting in the middle of it all, focused like the world made more sense in pieces. Word spread faster than rent notices ever did. People came with devices tucked under their arms, fans that sputtered, clocks that froze, speakers that rattled. They didn't knock timidly either. They knocked with purpose, like they already believed the boy inside my house could fix whatever they carried. The first person pressed $5 into Isaac's palm. He blinked at it like he'd forgotten money existed. You earned it, I told him. He didn't argue, just placed it inside a jar he cleaned and set on the table. He wrote "Fix Fund" on a piece of tape and stuck it to the glass. Every dollar after that went in there, and I never saw him take a single bill out for himself. The quiet discipline made me watch him differently. He wasn't just passing time. He was building something, even if he didn't say it out loud. Around that time, Mila started falling into her own rhythm. She came home with notebooks full of neat handwriting, and I'd catch her reading to Jordan as if teaching him was her job. She made. Sure, he did homework, brushed his teeth, washed before bed. There was something methodical in her, something soft but steady, like stability wasn't new to her, just rare. And Jordan, for the first time, he started sleeping through the night. No flinching, no sudden sitting up, no whispering fears to the dark. He woke up hungry, calm, ready for school, his little hands eager to help Isaac organize screws or sort parts after dinner. My house felt full, but not crowded, busy, but not chaotic, alive, but in a quiet, breathing way. One day, a woman from the building knocked with 2 fans and a heater. I opened the door, ready to tell her. He was at the repair shop with Mr. Willis, but she already walked in. He'll know what to do, she said, setting things down like she trusted him more than any grown man she knew. But he ain't here. I'll leave them, she interrupted. Tell him Miss Clara said thank you. Before I could respond, she slid a folded bill across the table. $20. I stared at it, stunned. Isaac came home an hour later, hands smudged with grease, eyes sharp from whatever Mr. Willis had drilled into him. There's work waiting, I said. He didn't answer. He just set his backpack down and got to fixing. Mila handed him tools the way an assistant knows her role. Jordan swept metal shavings from the floor with absolute seriousness. Watching them felt like watching a seed split open under dry soil. Later that week, Isaac asked if a friend could help after school. He holds things steady, he said, like that was enough reason to hire somebody. I didn't have the strength to argue. The boy came, worked for 2 hours, earned a sandwich and a few dollars from the jar, and left with gratitude written all over him. People kept coming. Money kept dropping into the jar. And quietly, Isaac kept learning, fixing harder things, asking deeper questions, staying later at the shop. One night, long after the sun dipped, he returned home with a manila envelope tucked under his arm. His steps were slower, heavier, not tired, intentional. Mila noticed first. Jordan, too. They watched him place the envelope gently on the table like it contained something fragile. What's that? I asked, folding laundry but watching him close. He didn't smile. He didn't build a moment. He just slid the envelope toward me with fingers that didn't tremble. Inside was a paper, black ink, government seal, an application, filed, paid for. Lewis Repair Services, registered owner, Isaac Lewis. My name, my surname on something growing. He didn't look at me when he spoke. I registered it today. He said quietly, under your name, so it'll always have a home. Time doesn't pass the way people think it does. It doesn't sweep in fast like a storm or drag its feet like sorrow. It builds quietly, layer by layer, until you look up one day and the children who once slept on your floor have become people with lives that stretch beyond your front door. That's how it happened for us. Not suddenly, not with fireworks, just steadily. Isaac grew faster than I could track. The boy who once fixed fans and radios on my living room table began studying machines I didn't even have names for, things with screens, circuits, chips so small you could lose them in dust. Mr. Willis kept him under his wing until Isaac outgrew the shop, then introduced him to people who worked in offices so clean they didn't allow grease inside. Isaac hated those offices at first. He'd come home frustrated, saying the men there talked too much and did too little. But he learned their language, business plans, client proposals, contracts, and somewhere along the way, that fixed fund jar turned into a bank account with more zeros than I'd ever seen in my life. He never bragged, never flashed it. He just kept becoming. Mila found her path in a quieter way. Books filled the spaces where fear once lived inside her. She carried notebooks everywhere, spiral-bound, edges frayed from use. I'd hear her reading out loud when she thought no one was listening, practicing the gentle tone teachers used to steady a room full of children. When she got her first job as an assistant teacher, she wore the same dress she'd ironed 3 nights in a row. She looked in the mirror with a small smile, the kind that sneaks up on a person who spent too many years hiding from their own reflection. Jordan became the caretaker among us without even trying. He listened more than he spoke. He carried softness like it was armor. When he decided to go into social work, he told me quietly Some kids need someone who understands silence. I understood that more than he knew. As for me, I didn't rise the way they did. I didn't climb ladders or build anything with wires. But something inside me settled. I didn't walk around with the heaviness I used to. The fear of being alone loosened its grip. My heart stopped jumping at every knock on the door. I was still humble, still working, still living in the house that almost slipped from my fingers. But I was steady. That part mattered more than anything. Sometimes on quiet evenings, we'd sit together, grown now, each with their own lives, and share dinner like the old days. Not because we were trying to recreate anything, but because the habit of staying close had written itself into us. Isaac always sat in the same chair he'd used when repairing devices years ago. Mila brought stories from her classroom, tiny moments that carried laughter and frustration. Jordan talked about the kids he counseled. Never details, just feelings, the weight of carrying other people's pain. I'd listen and breathe and feel the kind of peace that doesn't come from riches, but from not being abandoned anymore. 25 years passed like that, slow, steady, almost gentle, until the morning everything shifted again. I was folding laundry, the radio playing low in the kitchen the way it usually did, static mixed with soft gospel melodies. I wasn't paying attention at first, too lost in the rhythm of folding shirts warm from the dryer. Then I heard it, my surname, not spoken in passing, not mispronounced or tossed casually. Clear, crisp, announced with weight. Lewis Innovations has just secured a major contract, one of the fastest rising tech companies in the region. My hands froze. Lewis Innovations. My surname, attached to success spoken through speakers that had once carried eviction notices and weather alerts. I stood there, heart thudding slow as the announcer continued. Founded and led by entrepreneur Isaac Lewis. The room tilted, not with fear, with recognition, with something deep in my chest unfurling after years of being folded small. My surname alive in the world in a way I had never imagined. I didn't expect my surname on the radio to bring anything other than pride. I didn't expect it to echo down streets far beyond my neighborhood or catch the ears of people who once ran from it like it was poison. Life has a way of circling back, though quiet, steady, without warning. A week after the broadcast, I heard my doorbell ring, not the soft knock of neighbors, not Isaac's firm press. This was quick, nervous, the kind of knock people give when they don't want to be seen waiting. When I opened the door, I had to hold my breath. Tyrone, older now, shoulders heavier, face lined with the kind of wear that life etches into people who don't have enough wins to balance the losses. His clothes weren't ragged, but they weren't new. A man trying to keep dignity stitched together with old thread. Before I could say anything, Kiana stepped up behind him. She looked smaller somehow, not in size, but in spirit. Her hair was tied back in a way that suggested she was doing it herself. Her eyes darted everywhere, at my shoes, at the wall, at the floor, but not at me. They hadn't come to hug me. I knew that from the air between us. Thin, tight, all business. Tyrone, I said quietly. He nodded like it pained him. We just got back in town. I studied his face. He didn't look at me like a son returning. He looked like a man calculating something. How long to stay, what to ask, how to keep pride intact while needing something. Kiana swallowed hard. Is it okay if we come in? I stepped aside. They walked in the way strangers do, hands close to their bodies, eyes scanning the room as if searching for proof of how I'd been living. Mila's diploma hung on the wall. Jordan's certificate from the youth center sat framed on the shelf. A photo of Isaac accepting an award from the city glowed in a cheap frame by the lamp. Tyrone paused. In front of that one a second too long. "So," he muttered, clearing his throat, "we heard something on the radio." My chest tightened. There it was. The real reason. Kiana nodded quickly, confirming his words. "There's a company, Lewis Innovations. They're hiring. Good pay. Good benefits. They said they got branches all over now." Her voice wasn't warm. It wasn't soft. It was hopeful in the way people become hopeful when they're drowning and a raft floats by. Any raft, even if it belongs to someone they once left behind. I didn't speak. I didn't give them comfort or coldness. I just listened. Tyrone shifted from foot to foot. "We were thinking maybe you'd heard something. Jobs being opened. You know how to talk to people. Maybe you could point us somewhere." Not once did he say, "How have you been? Are you okay? I'm sorry." Their eyes were burdened, but not with guilt, with need. Kiana finally sat down, the weight of her struggles slipping into the chair before she did. "Rent got too high where we were staying," she said softly. "My hours got cut. Tyrone lost his job months ago." She paused, swallowing shame she didn't want to show. "Things just fell apart. My heart didn't break this time, not the way it once did. I felt for them, yes, but not from the same place. Something in me had toughened, settled, learned." I folded my hands in my lap and let the silence stretch. They didn't ask about Isaac. Didn't ask if I had contact with the company. Didn't imagine they were sitting in a house built on the blood and sweat of 3 children they never knew. They only wanted a lead, a chance, a job. Before I could decide what to tell them, Tyrone stood abruptly. "We're going to apply today. Just thought we'd let you know we were around." Kiana murmured, "If you hear anything, just text us." They walked to the door slowly, like the space between us was a hallway lined with glass, fragile, dangerous, best crossed carefully. When the door closed behind them, the room felt different. Not heavy, not light, just changed. Later that evening, Isaac sent a message to my phone. "We're reviewing new applicants tomorrow." I stared at the screen, breath caught somewhere between yesterday and the years that shaped us. My biological children were applying to work at a company built from the scraps of their absence. And they did not know their mother is connected. The knock at my door came early, too early for neighbors, too hesitant for delivery men. I was folding towels when I heard it, and my hands paused in midair. There's a particular rhythm to certain knocks, the kind that drags memory up by the roots whether you want it or not. When I opened the door, Tyrone stood there again. His clothes were pressed, but not new. His hair freshly cut, but the exhaustion around his eyes couldn't be trimmed away. Behind him, Kiana stood small, almost shrinking into her own jacket, like she was trying to soften her presence. "Morning," Tyrone said. Not "Mama," not "How are you?" Just "Morning." "Come in," I answered. They stepped inside carefully, as if walking into a stranger's home. Their eyes grazed the framed photos, the certificates on the wall, the warm light in the living room. None of those things existed the last time they were here, when they walked out and left silence hanging behind them like smoke. Now they examined everything with thin politeness stretched over deeper fear. "We didn't want to bother you," Kiana said, her voice gentle but shaky at the edges. "Just thought we should check in." Check in. It sounded like something you say to a neighbor you barely speak to. I nodded and let them sit. Tyrone's leg bounced slightly, barely noticeable unless you'd raised him. I noticed. Years may change faces, but tension keeps its old shape. They talked around things at first. Weather, the neighborhood, work, well, the lack of it. They spoke in careful circles, protecting their pride, even though the holes in their lives showed through every word. "Rent too high everywhere," Tyrone muttered, adjusting his coat, sleeve though it didn't need fixing. "Places don't pay enough." Kiana nodded quickly, filling space. "We're just trying to get back on our feet. Been looking everywhere." I listened. I didn't offer comfort, not from cruelty, just because the years had stretched too far between us. The part of me that once rushed to soothe them had grown quiet, not cold, just still. They glanced at each other before bringing up what they really came for. "You know that company on the radio?" Tyrone asked, keeping his tone casual. "Lewis Innovations." I kept my face steady. "I heard about it." Kiana leaned forward, elbows tight against her ribs. "They're hiring. Good pay. Benefits. People say they treat staff real well." The room went quiet for a moment. Not tense, just layered. Then Tyrone cleared his throat. "We applied. Both of us." Kiana added softly, "It's a chance. Maybe a fresh start. If you hear anything about openings or know someone, just keep us in mind." The request hung in the air like steam from a boiling pot. Thin, hot, unavoidable. They weren't asking me for love, or forgiveness, or a place in my life again. They were asking for opportunity, a bridge to survival. From the same house they once walked out of without looking back. I nodded once. "I'll let you know if I hear." That was all I could offer without lying. We sat there a few minutes more, talking about small things, filling space with the kind of conversation people used to avoid looking directly at their regrets. Eventually they stood to leave. "Thank you for letting us stop by," Kiana said, her eyes lingering on me for half a second longer than necessary. Tyrone didn't say much, didn't need to. His silence carried weight. Not apology, not hope, just the reality of a man cornered by life and forced to revisit the past he once ran from. They walked out slowly, shoulders close, like the world outside was colder than they remembered. I closed the door gently. No anger rose up in me. No longing either. Just a strange stillness, like a door had opened that wasn't meant for them, but they were stepping toward it anyway. Later that afternoon, while I was watering the plant on my windowsill, my phone buzzed. A short message from Isaac. "New applications came in today." Another message followed. Only 3 words, but they hit harder than the knock on my door. 2 familiar names. And then the final line, the one that settled deep into my chest. Their applications just landed on my desk. I was sweeping my kitchen floor when Isaac called. Not a text, not a voicemail, a call. He never interrupted my morning unless something carried weight. "Ms. Della," he said, his voice steady but holding something underneath. "I need you to come to the office today." My heart tightened, not in fear, just the way a mother stiffens when a child's tone shifts into seriousness. "Everything all right?" I asked. "You'll see when you get here." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Isaac had grown into a man who spoke only what mattered. I put on my best blouse, the one I ironed only for funerals or Sunday service, and walked to the bus stop. The city felt taller than usual, buildings reaching upward like hands. When I stepped off the bus, the glass of Lewis Innovations reflected the sun in a way that made the whole street look brighter. Inside, the lobby was polished, quiet, purposeful. People walked with clipboards, badges, plans. They nodded respectfully as I passed, though most didn't know who I was. Respect has a way of following the name on the building before it follows the face. The elevator doors opened on the top floor. Isaac stood waiting in a navy suit, not flashy, just clean, tailored, grown. When he smiled at me, something in my chest softened. "Come on," he said. "We're starting." "We," I repeated, but he'd already turned. He led me down a long hallway. The glass walls revealed a boardroom larger than my entire house. Men and women in suits sat around the table, some young, some older, all looking like people who spoke in decisions and numbers. I hesitated at the doorway. "Go ahead," Isaac whispered. When I stepped in, conversations quieted. Eyes shifted toward me, not confused, not dismissive, just curious. At the far end of the table sat a name placard. Della Lewis, board member. My knees almost buckled. I stared at it, unable to breathe for a moment. My name looked too clean, too official, too far from everything I'd swept, scrubbed, carried, survived. Isaac pulled out the chair for me. "Have a seat, Miss Della." I lowered myself slowly, hands trembling in a way I tried to hide. The room kept moving, papers shuffling, laptops opening, murmurs rising, but all I could hear was the beat of my own heart. Why is my name? Isaac sat beside me. "You helped build all this," he said quietly. "Your house was the first office I ever worked in. Your table was the first workbench. Everything I am came through your door." I swallowed hard, unable to answer. "This isn't charity," he continued. "This is acknowledgement, ownership, respect." I looked at the placard again, fighting the urge to touch it just to feel if it was real. The meeting started. I didn't talk. I didn't try to. I just listened, letting the weight of the moment settle into me. These people, these professionals discussed projections, contracts, investments. And there I sat, a woman who once cried over not affording a birthday cake, now holding a seat among them. Every few minutes, Isaac glanced at me, making sure I wasn't overwhelmed. But overwhelm wasn't the word. It was something deeper, quieter, a shift, a recognition of the years behind me and the years ahead of them. Halfway through the meeting, the HR director entered carrying a folder. She placed it in front of Isaac. "These 2 applications just came in," she said. "High priority candidates." I didn't pay much attention at first. People applied to Isaac's company every day. It wasn't unusual for HR to deliver things in person. But then I noticed something. The way Isaac's posture changed. Barely, but enough. The way his eyes flicked to me before he opened the folder. The way the room's energy stilled, even though no one understood why. He opened the folder slowly. Inside were 2 applicant files, 2 names printed neatly on top, 2 lives circling back in ways they didn't understand. HR slid the files across the table, closer to him. My children's names stared up at both of us. Their applications had landed on my son's desk. I didn't ask Isaac what he planned. I didn't need to, The way he held those two files told me this wasn't a moment he intended to let slip quietly past us, but I didn't know he would move with such precision or such mercy. He called me early the next morning. "Come to the office," he said. "We're something you feel steady in." Steady, not strong, not powerful. Steady. I dressed slow, my hands trembling the way they hadn't trembled since the day Tyrone and Kiana walked out of my life. When I reached the building, Isaac was waiting in the lobby, suit crisp, eyes calm but shadowed with intention. "Follow me," he said. He led me down a hallway I'd never seen before, past offices and glass partitions, until we reached a room with tinted glass stretching across one entire wall. Inside, there was a long table, 2 chairs, a pitcher of water. A simple room. Quiet. Controlled. "Sit here," Isaac said gently. I obeyed. From my seat, I could see through the tinted glass, but no one on the other side could see in. A mirror for them. A window for me. Why all this? I whispered. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Because truth sounds different when people think no one is listening. Before I could respond, he slipped out of the room. I forced myself to breathe. Slow. Steady. Prepared for whatever came next. A moment later, I saw movement on the other side of the glass. Tyrone walked in first, shoulders tense, jaw set tight like he was entering a courtroom. Kiana followed, smoothing her jacket, eyes scanning the room with thin politeness stretched over something harsher. Isaac entered last and sat across from them. He didn't soften his tone or offer them comfort. He simply opened a folder, their folder, and said, "Tell me about yourselves." They started carefully, professionally, rehearsed lines. "We're hard workers. We just need a chance. We're good with people." But it didn't take long before the cracks started showing. "What about your upbringing?" Isaac asked calmly. Tyrone scoffed. "We raised ourselves, honestly. Our mother wasn't helpful." My heart slowed. Not broke, just slowed. Kiana nodded, bitterness slipping under her words. "We had to get away to survive. She held us back. Barely did anything for us. Held them back. Held them back." I felt the words split something quiet in my chest, not the old wound, just the echo of how deep it once was. Tyrone leaned back like a man recounting a burden he never carried. "We don't owe her anything. She made choices that kept us struggling." Kiana added quickly, "We're better off without her. Honestly, we've been doing much better on our own. Until recent setbacks." Isaac didn't react. He didn't correct them. Didn't defend me. He let them talk. He let them reveal the truth, the one they rehearsed so long it became their version of survival. Tyrone exhaled sharply, leaning forward. "If we get this job, we earn it. We don't want pity connections from anybody tied to her life." "She's irrelevant," Kiana said softly but firmly. "We're not here to talk about her." The words didn't stab. They didn't rip. They simply settled. The past doesn't break you the same way when you've already rebuilt yourself in silence. I watched Isaac watching them, studying the distance in their eyes, the pride in their posture, the way they shaped their story around a woman they hadn't bothered to know for 25 years. When they finished talking, the room grew still. Air thick, truth exposed. Isaac closed the folder slowly, deliberately, in a way that felt like the turning of a page. Then he stood. Tyrone frowned. "Interview over?" Kiana lifted her chin. "Did we get the job?" Isaac didn't answer either question. He walked to the door, paused, looked back at them with a calm that carried weight. "There's someone," he said quietly, "who needs to hear you clearly." The hallway felt longer on the walk back than it had on the way in. Isaac didn't rush. He walked ahead of me with the calm certainty of a man who understood what truth could do when exposed to daylight. I followed, steadying my breath, steadying my heart, steadying whatever part of me used to tremble around my own children. When he opened the door to the interview room, Tyrone and Kiana were still seated, mid-confidence, mid-pride, mid-lie. Their voices cut off the moment they saw Isaac step aside. And the second I walked in behind him, the air collapsed. Tyrone's face fell first. His jaw loosened, eyes widening like he'd seen a ghost wearing his guilt. Kiana's hand shot to her mouth, covering whatever breath or apology she tried to swallow before it escaped. I didn't stop walking, didn't look away, didn't let the moment shrink me. I stepped into the center of the room and placed both hands flat on the table, not to steady myself, just to ground the space. They stared at me like children again, not because they felt young, but because the truth had stripped them of whatever age life had placed on their shoulders. "Mama," Tyrone started. "No," I said softly. "You had your turn to speak." The silence that followed had weight. Not anger, not sentiment, something heavier, quieter, the kind of truth that doesn't need volume. Kiana's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Not one tear fell. She held everything inside the way she'd held her resentment all those years. Tight, controlled, pain disguised as dignity. I drew a long breath and let it out slowly. I came to listen. I said, their shoulders tensed, their faces closed, their shame bloomed without sound. And I've heard enough. Those words didn't crack in my mouth. They didn't wobble or shake. They stood in the room with their own spine, the same way I had once stood alone in a house filled with silence the day they walked out. Tyrone leaned forward, elbows on his knees, trying to catch my eyes. "You don't understand." I raised my hand gently. He stopped speaking immediately. Kiana swallowed hard. "We didn't mean it like that. We were just nervous, and nervous doesn't make you rewrite history," I said calmly, "and fear doesn't erase what you believe when you think I'm not listening." Their faces cracked, barely but visibly. The look children get when the world finally shows them the mirror they've avoided. Isaac stood behind me, silent, arms folded. He didn't interrupt, didn't guide, didn't mediate. He let the weight fall exactly where it needed to. I turned toward him, not offering excuses, not offering pain, not offering explanation. Just truth. "Isaac," I said quietly, "make the decision that protects the company." His expression didn't change, but the air around us did. The authority he carried, the one he built from scraps and sweat, settled fully into the room. Tyrone jolted slightly. "Wait, what does that mean?" Kiana's voice cracked. "Mama, please talk to him. We need." Need. That word once had power over me, but not now. "You'll be all right," I said, not unkindly. "The world is wide. Opportunities don't end here." Their mouths opened, but nothing came out. There are moments when impact steals sound before tears arrive. This was one of them. Isaac walked to the stack of papers waiting on the table. 2 files, 2 names, 2 paths crossing something they had never imagined. Accountability. He brought out a pen, uncapped it, looked at me once, not for permission, but for presence. I nodded. He signed the rejection. And just like that, the decision was made. Isaac didn't speak when he led me down the corridor. His footsteps were steady, purposeful, the way they'd always been from the day he dragged that broken computer into my house. But something different lived in the air now, heavier, fuller, almost ceremonial. We reached a door made of frosted glass. He pushed it open gently and motioned for me to step inside. The room was quiet, high above the city, sunlight spilling across polished floors. From here, the streets looked small, distant, like they belonged to a life I had survived but no longer lived inside. "Come sit," he said softly. My heartbeat slowed. I lowered myself into a chair so smooth it felt like a contradiction to every hard bench, every cafeteria stool, every night spent sitting on the edge of a bed, wondering how tomorrow would feed us. Isaac placed a thick envelope in front of me. Not rushed, not dramatic, just intentional. "I've been waiting to give you this," he said. I opened the flap with careful fingers. Papers slid out, documents, official seals, signatures already in place. My breath caught when I read the words: ownership stake, voting rights, permanent board position, and a foundation, Lewis Community Fund, bearing my name in bold print. I stared at the documents as if they were written in a language my past couldn't translate. "Isaac," my voice cracked. I hated how small it sounded in such a large room. He pulled a chair beside me, not across from me, but beside me, the way children sit when they want to share a view, not dominate it. "You saved us without trying," he said, his tone low, honest, stripped of anything performative. "You gave us a home when you didn't even have one yourself. You gave us dignity, stability, a place to grow into ourselves." I shook my head slowly, overwhelmed. "I just let you in. That was everything," he said. "The day you opened that door, you changed every direction our lives were heading in. We're here because of you." My eyes stung, not with tears I couldn't hold back, but with the weight of years I finally understood. The loneliness, the loss, the silence, the scraped floors, the broken things, the mended things. All of it had knitted itself into a story I never planned to write. "You didn't have to do this," I whispered. Isaac smiled, small, quiet, the same way he used to smile when a machine finally came back to life under his hands. "Legacy isn't something a person asks for," he said. "It's something they create by surviving, by loving, by showing up, whether they mean to or not." He placed his hand over mine, grounding me. "This," he said, tapping the documents, "is your legacy now." I let the words settle. They didn't hover above me. They took root deep in my chest. The kind of truth that grows slowly, the kind that changes posture and breath and memory. Isaac stood and offered me his arm. "Come on," he said. "Walk with me." We moved through the top floor hall, and when the elevator doors opened, the company hum met us, voices, footsteps, quiet greetings. As we stepped into the lobby, employees straightened. Heads nodded. Respectful smiles warmed the air. Not pity, not curiosity. Respect. They knew who I was now, not because of the documents in my hand, but because of what my presence meant to the man who built the company they worked for. As we reached the tall glass doors, I saw movement outside. Tyrone and Kiana stood on the sidewalk, clutching rejection letters in their hands. Their faces were pale, eyes darting around the building like they'd stepped into a world that didn't make room for them anymore. Then they saw me. Their expressions twisted. Shock first, then disbelief, then the ache of a truth arriving too late. They watched me walk through the lobby with Isaac beside me, board badge swinging at my hip, employees nodding as I passed. Their mouths parted, their eyes filled, but no words came. I stepped outside, the sunlight warm on my face, the documents solid in my hand. And in the quiet that followed, I finally understood the life I had grown into, the life loneliness pushed open, the life 3 children rebuilt with their bare hands, the life my own children never imagined would include me. I breathed deeply, letting everything fall into place. I wasn't meant to stay broken. I was meant to rise somewhere they could no longer reach.